Hello, and welcome to History for Dreaming. Imagine a continent that never appeared on any map. A civilization so advanced that its very existence defies what we thought possible about the ancient world. A land that stretched across the Indian Ocean, connecting distant shores, home to millions of souls who built cities of crystal and stone, who charted the stars and mastered the secrets of the earth. By all accounts, this place should be legend, pure myth, a story told to explain the unexplainable. And yet, across cultures separated by thousands of miles, the same story emerges. From the sacred texts of Tamil scholars to the oral histories of Pacific Islanders, from the esoteric writings of Greek philosophers to the secret knowledge of Tibetan monks, they all speak of the same vanished world. Tonight, you will walk the streets of this lost civilization. You will experience what it felt like to live in a world that existed before recorded history. You will witness the daily rhythms of a people whose very existence challenges everything we think we know about the human story. You will journey through cities that may have sunk beneath the waves, or perhaps never existed at all, except in the collective memory of humanity. But before we begin this journey into the unknown, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It's such a kind gesture, and it truly helps keep these stories alive, and I'm so grateful for your support. I'm also always curious to know where in the world and at what time you're joining me tonight. Now, simply relax. Allow the busy world to disappear as we travel back to a time before time, to a place that exists only in whispers and fragments, to the lost continent of Lemuria. You open your eyes to a world that should not exist. The morning light is different here. It filters through the atmosphere with a quality you have never seen before, painting everything in shades of amber and rose gold. The air itself seems to shimmer with a strange luminescence, as if the very particles of existence vibrate at a frequency unknown to the modern world. You stand at the edge of a great plaza, your bare feet touching stones that are warm despite the early hour. Stones cut with such precision that no mortar holds them together, yet they have stood for generations beyond counting. Around you, the city awakens. This is not the city you know from your own time. There are no automobiles, no electrical wires, no concrete towers reaching toward the sky. Instead, there are structures of stone and crystal that seem to grow from the earth itself, their surfaces etched with patterns that shift and change in the moving light. Some buildings rise in spirals that defy your understanding of architecture. Others spread horizontally, their roofs supported by columns carved to resemble the trunks of ancient trees, their surfaces alive with reliefs depicting creatures both familiar and strange. The streets are paved with stones of different colors, arranged in patterns that might be decorative or might serve some purpose you cannot yet comprehend. As the light strengthens, you realize the patterns are not random. They form pathways that seem to guide the flow of people, creating currents and eddies in the morning crowd that moves with a purpose you are only beginning to understand. The stones themselves are unlike any you have encountered. Some are smooth and dark, reflecting the sky like pools of still water. Others are pale and translucent, seeming to contain their own inner light. You are wearing a simple robe of fabric, unlike anything produced in your own time. It is light yet warm, woven from fibers that might be plant or might be something else entirely. The weave is so fine that it moves like water against your skin, adjusting to the temperature of your body and the air around you. On your feet are sandals held by straps of braided cord, the soles thick enough to protect yet thin enough to let you feel the texture of the stones beneath you. The people who pass you are unlike any population you have seen. They are tall, most of them, with features that seem to combine characteristics of many different peoples. Their skin tones range from deep bronze to pale gold. Their hair varies from black to auburn to shades that seem to shift in the changing light. They move with a grace that suggests a different relationship with their bodies than you know from your own experience. There is no hurry in their movements, yet no hesitation either. They walk as if they know exactly where they are going and have all the time in the world to get there. The sounds of the morning are building around you. You hear voices speaking in a language that flows like music, rising and falling in tones that seem to carry meaning beyond the words themselves. There is singing coming from somewhere, a melody that weaves through the ambient sounds of the city, sometimes clear and sometimes fading into the background murmur. You hear the sound of water, constant and pervasive, though you cannot yet see its source. There are bells, too, ringing in patterns that might mark the hours or might signal something else entirely. The scent of the air is clean and complex. There is salt, suggesting proximity to the sea. Though you cannot yet see water, there are flowers, blooming somewhere nearby, their fragrance sweet but not cloying. There is incense burning, the smoke rising in thin streams from buildings throughout the city, carrying prayers or offerings or simply marking the sacred nature of the day. There is the smell of bread baking, reminding you that even in this strange place, people must eat, must sustain their bodies with the fruits of the earth. As you stand there, trying to orient yourself in this impossible place, a figure approaches you. She is a woman of indeterminate age, her face both young and ancient, wearing robes of deep blue adorned with symbols you do not recognize. She smiles at you with an expression of gentle recognition, as if she has been expecting you, as if your arrival in this place was not an accident but a homecoming. She speaks, and somehow you understand her, though the language she uses bears no resemblance to any tongue you have learned. Her words bypass your ears and go directly to your mind, translated by some mechanism you cannot explain. She welcomes you to the city of Amara, one of the great centers of learning in the land of Mu, the place that others will one day call Lemuria. She tells you that you have returned to the time of the third root race, to an epoch when humanity walked a different path, when the relationship between mind and matter was not yet fixed in the patterns that would later become immutable law. You want to ask questions. You want to know where you are, when you are, how you came to be here. But she raises a hand gently, and you understand that questions will be answered in their own time. For now, you are to observe, to experience, to allow yourself to be absorbed into the rhythm of this place. She gestures toward the center of the plaza, where people are beginning to gather, and you follow her, your feet finding their way along the patterned stones as if they remember a path you have never walked before. The plaza opens before you, vast and empty of buildings, its floor a mosaic of colored stones depicting the night sky as seen from this latitude, complete with constellations you recognize and others you do not. At the center of the plaza stands a structure unlike anything you have seen in your travels through the city. It is a circle of standing stones, each one taller than 10 men standing on each other's shoulders, their surfaces polished to a mirror shine. The stones are arranged with mathematical precision, aligned to invisible lines that connect earth and sky, marking positions of stars and planets, capturing energies you can sense but not name. This is the heart of Amara. This is where the city began, where the first builders placed the first stone, guided by knowledge passed down from teachers whose names are lost even here in this ancient time. This is where you will begin to understand what it means to walk the streets of Lemuria, to live in a civilization that exists in that strange space between history and myth, between what was and what might have been, between the memory of humanity and the dreams of those who came before. The sun climbs higher in the sky, and with it, the city of Amara fully awakens. You follow the woman in blue robes through streets that wind and curve according to principles you are only beginning to perceive. The layout of the city is not random, but neither does it follow the grid pattern you know from your own time. Instead, the streets spiral outward from the central plaza, creating a pattern that from above would resemble a nautilus shell or the curve of a galaxy. Each spiral connects to others through smaller pathways, creating a network that allows movement in all directions yet somehow guides people toward their destinations with minimal effort. Along these streets, the business of daily life unfolds. You pass workshops where artisans practice their crafts. In one, a man shapes clay on a wheel that spins without any visible mechanism, his hands moving with practiced precision to create vessels of perfect symmetry. In another, a woman weaves fabric on a loom that seems to operate through thought alone, the threads moving in response to her focused intention, creating patterns of such complexity that they seem to shift and change even as you watch. There are gardens everywhere. They are not merely decorative but serve multiple purposes. Some grow food, their beds arranged in terraced levels that create microclimates for different crops. You see vegetables you recognize and others that are entirely unfamiliar. There are fruits hanging from trees, some growing in clusters, others singular and precious. There are herbs, their scent releasing as people brush past them, filling the air with fragrances both medicinal and culinary. Other gardens are purely for beauty, though even these serve deeper functions. They are arranged according to principles that balance the energy of the city, creating spaces of calm and contemplation, places where the stone and crystal of the buildings gives way to the green and living world. These gardens are tended by specialists who understand the relationship between plants and people, who know which combinations of flowers and trees will create specific effects on those who walk among them. The people you pass are engaged in activities both familiar and strange. Children run through the streets, their laughter universal across all times and places. They play games that involve stones and sticks, chasing each other in patterns that might be simple play or might be early training in the complex movement disciplines that adults practice in the courtyards and plazas. The children are learning, always learning, absorbing the knowledge of their civilization through games and songs and stories told by elders who sit in the shade of great trees. You see people gathered in small groups, engaged in conversation. Some discussions are practical, concerning trade or construction or the management of the city's resources. Others are philosophical, debating the nature of consciousness or the structure of reality. There is no clear division between these types of conversation. The practical and the philosophical interweave, reflecting a worldview in which all aspects of life are connected, in which the arrangement of stones in a building and the nature of the human soul are part of the same great study. The woman who guides you stops at a fountain. It is one of many scattered throughout the city, each one unique in design yet serving the same essential functions. This fountain consists of 3 basins arranged in descending levels. Water flows from the top basin to the middle, then to the lowest, finally draining away through channels carved in the plaza floor. The water is crystal clear, and people stop to drink from it, cupping their hands or using vessels they carry with them. You are invited to drink, and as the water touches your lips, you realize it is unlike any water you have tasted before. It is cold and pure, but there is something more to it, a quality that seems to refresh not just your body, but your very essence. The woman explains that the water comes from deep beneath the city, from sources that have flowed since before humans walked the earth. It is filtered through layers of crystal and stone, emerging charged with minerals and energies that promote health and clarity of mind. As you stand by the fountain, you observe the social patterns of this place. People greet each other with gestures that are both physical and energetic. There is bowing, the depth of the bow indicating the relationship between the people involved. There is touching, hands placed briefly on shoulders or forearms, creating momentary connections. But there is also something you cannot see directly, a recognition that passes between people on a level beyond the physical, an acknowledgement of the spark of consciousness that resides in every being. The clothing people wear is varied, yet follows certain common patterns. Most wear robes similar to yours, though in different colors and with different patterns woven or embroidered into the fabric. The colors seem to indicate something, perhaps occupation or social role or stage of life. You see people in white, in blue, in green, in shades of gold and amber. Some wear headdresses or jewelry, pieces crafted from metals and stones, their designs geometric and precise. There are no shops in the sense you understand from your own time. Instead, there are centers where goods are distributed according to need and contribution. You watch as people approach these centers, presenting tokens or simply speaking to the attendants, receiving what they require for their households or their work. There is no haggling, no competition for resources. The system seems to operate on principles of trust and mutual responsibility, though you cannot yet fully grasp how such a system remains stable and fair. The woman guides you toward a building larger than most, its entrance marked by 2 columns carved with spiraling patterns. She explains that this is a place of learning, one of many in the city, where knowledge is preserved and transmitted. You enter through the great doors, leaving the brightness of the street for the cool dimness of the interior. Inside, the building is vast and quiet. The walls are lined with niches, each one holding what appears to be a crystal or a scroll or some other repository of information. There are tables where people sit, studying, their faces focused in concentration. There are rooms opening off the main hall, and through the doorways you glimpse more specialized spaces, some containing instruments you do not recognize, others arranged for group instruction or private contemplation. A teacher is addressing a small group of students. He is elderly, his hair white, his face weathered by years of sun and wind and thought. He speaks about the nature of time, explaining concepts that your mind struggles to grasp. He describes time not as a river flowing in one direction, but as a sea in which past, present, and future exist simultaneously, accessible to those who have developed the necessary skills of perception. The students listen with deep attention, occasionally asking questions that reveal their sophisticated understanding of these complex ideas. You realize that in this place, education is not about preparation for a specific occupation or social role. Instead, it is about the development of consciousness itself, about learning to perceive and interact with reality in ways that unlock potential lying dormant in every human being. The subjects taught here range from practical crafts to abstract philosophy, from mathematics and astronomy to music and poetry, all understood as different aspects of a unified whole. As the day progresses, you begin to understand the rhythm of life in Amara. It is a rhythm that balances work and rest, individual effort and communal cooperation, material concerns and spiritual development. It is a rhythm that seems natural and sustainable, creating a society that functions smoothly without the stress and conflict you know from your own time. Whether such a society truly existed or exists only in the dreams of those who imagine a better world, you cannot yet say. For now, you are here, walking these streets, breathing this air, experiencing what it might have been like to live in the lost civilization of Lemuria. As the sun reaches its zenith, the woman in blue robes leads you away from the central districts of Amara toward the eastern quarter of the city. The character of the streets changes as you walk. The buildings become more widely spaced, interspersed with larger gardens and open plazas. The architecture grows more elaborate, with structures that rise in multiple levels, their terraces planted with flowering vines and small trees. You can see the ocean now, stretching away to the horizon, its surface glittering in the midday light. The city sits on a rise of land that slopes gently down to the shore, where you can make out docks and harbour structures, boats with sails of various colours moving in and out on the tide. Your destination becomes clear as you round a curve in the street. Before you rises the Temple of Knowledge, the great repository of learning that serves not just Amara but the entire region. It is the largest structure you have seen in the city, a complex of interconnected buildings that spreads across several acres of land. The main building is circular, its walls constructed of white stone that seems to glow with its own inner light. The roof is a dome covered in tiles of beaten gold, and at its apex sits a crystal that catches the sun and breaks it into rainbows that dance across the plaza below. The entrance to the temple is through a portico supported by columns carved to resemble the trunks of trees. The columns are so realistic that you half expect to see leaves sprouting from their tops, but instead they support a lintel carved with symbols and glyphs, a text that tells the history of the temple's founding and the principles upon which it was established. You cannot read the script, but your guide explains that it was placed here 300 years ago, when the temple was built on the site of an even older structure, whose origins are lost in the mists of time before memory. As you pass through the entrance, you are struck by the quality of light inside. The temple has no windows in the conventional sense, yet it is filled with a soft, diffused illumination that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. You look up and see that the dome is not solid but is pierced by thousands of small openings, arranged in patterns that allow light to enter while maintaining the structural integrity of the roof. The openings are covered with thin sheets of crystal or glass, tinted in different colors, so that the light that reaches the floor below is broken into countless shades and hues. The interior of the temple is arranged in concentric circles, each ring devoted to a different area of study. The outermost ring is for beginners, for children and adults who are just beginning their education. Here, the basics are taught: reading and writing, fundamental mathematics, the principles of geometry and music, the stories of the ancestors and the structure of the cosmos as understood by this civilization. You watch as a teacher guides a group of young students through a lesson in astronomy. They stand around a large model of the heavens, a mechanical device of bronze and crystal that shows the movements of the sun and moon and planets across the sky. The teacher points to different parts of the model, explaining the relationships between the celestial bodies, how they influence the tides and the seasons, how they can be used for navigation and for marking the passage of time. The students ask questions with the unself-conscious curiosity of children. How far away are the stars? What makes the sun shine? Why does the moon change its shape? The teacher answers each question with patience and precision, never talking down to the students, always treating their inquiries as worthy of serious response. Education here, you realize, is not about memorizing facts, but about developing the ability to observe, to question, to think critically about the world and one's place in it. Moving inward to the next ring, you enter the domain of intermediate studies. Here, the students are older, young adults who have mastered the basics and are now delving deeper into specialized fields. You see groups gathered around tables, studying texts inscribed on scrolls and tablets. Others are engaged in practical work, conducting experiments, building models, practicing techniques under the guidance of master craftspeople. In one section, students of medicine are learning the properties of plants and minerals. They grind substances in mortars, mix them in careful proportions, test their effects on small animals, or on themselves under careful supervision. The medical knowledge of this civilization is extensive, combining empirical observation with theoretical understanding. They know about the circulation of blood, the function of organs, the role of diet and exercise in maintaining health. They also practice techniques that your own time would consider alternative or esoteric, working with energy flows in the body, using sound and light for healing, employing meditation and focused intention to influence physical processes. In another section, students of architecture are learning to design buildings that harmonize with the energy of the earth. They study the properties of different stones and metals, how they can be combined to create structures that are not only stable and beautiful, but that enhance the well-being of those who live and work within them. They learn about sacred geometry, the mathematical relationships that underlie all of creation, how these can be expressed in physical form to create spaces that uplift the human spirit. You come to a group studying what you would call physics, though they have no such term. They are investigating the nature of matter and energy, conducting experiments that probe the fundamental structure of reality. You watch as they demonstrate the properties of magnetism, using lodestones to move pieces of iron across a table. They show how light can be bent through crystals, how sound can shatter glass, how two objects of different weights fall at the same rate when dropped from the same height. The teacher in this section is explaining a theory about the relationship between mind and matter. She argues that consciousness is not separate from the physical world, but is woven into its very fabric. She claims that with proper training, the human mind can influence material reality directly, not through mechanical intervention, but through focused intention. To demonstrate, she holds a small crystal in her hand and concentrates. The crystal begins to glow with a faint light, growing brighter as she maintains her focus, then fading as she relaxes her concentration. You are not sure whether to believe what you are seeing. Your own understanding of how the world works does not include the possibility of matter responding to thought alone. Yet here in this place, in this time, such demonstrations are apparently commonplace. The students observe, without particular surprise, taking notes, asking questions about technique and theory, treating the demonstration as they would any other scientific observation. The innermost ring of the temple is reserved for advanced studies and for the masters themselves. This area is quieter, less populated, with fewer students and more individual study. The atmosphere is one of deep concentration, of minds engaged in wrestling with the most profound questions of existence. What is consciousness? What is the purpose of existence? What is the relationship between the individual soul and the universal spirit? In this section, there are chambers set aside for meditation and contemplation. You glimpse through an open doorway, a space with polished stone floors and bare walls, lit by a single opening in the ceiling through which a shaft of sunlight falls. A figure sits in the center of the room, cross-legged, perfectly still, so motionless that you wonder if they are even breathing. Your guide explains that this person has been sitting in meditation for 3 days, engaged in a practice designed to still the fluctuations of the mind and allow direct perception of reality beyond the veil of ordinary consciousness. There are also laboratories here, though not in the sense you know from your own time. These are spaces where students experiment with consciousness itself, exploring altered states, testing the limits of perception, developing abilities that most humans never realize they possess. Some practice lucid dreaming, learning to remain conscious while asleep, to navigate the dream world with the same clarity they bring to waking life. Others work on telepathy, attempting to transmit thoughts and images directly from mind to mind. Still others explore what they call astral projection, the ability to separate consciousness from the physical body and travel to distant locations. You are shown a chamber where the history of the civilization is preserved. The walls are lined with scrolls and codices, each one carefully maintained, protected from moisture and decay. These documents contain the accumulated knowledge of generations, the discoveries and insights of countless scholars, the stories and teachings that form the foundation of this culture. There are chronicles of events, descriptions of natural phenomena, philosophical treatises, poetry and music, mathematical proofs, and astronomical observations. Your guide selects one of the scrolls and unrolls it carefully. The text is written in a script that flows like water, beautiful to look at even though you cannot read it. She explains that this particular scroll describes the founding of the colony that became Amara, how a group of pioneers left the motherland far to the west and traveled across the ocean to settle this shore. They came seeking new lands to farm and mine, new territories to explore and understand, carrying with them the seeds of their civilization and the knowledge of their ancestors. The founding story tells of hardships endured, of storms at sea and encounters with the native peoples who already inhabited these lands. It tells of the negotiations and accommodations that were necessary to establish peaceful coexistence, of the exchange of knowledge and customs that enriched both groups. It tells of the construction of the first buildings, the establishment of the first gardens, the creation of the institutions that would allow the colony to thrive and grow into the great city it has become. As you listen to this history, you realize that Lemuria, or Mu as the inhabitants call it, is not a single unified empire, but a network of cities and settlements spread across a vast region. Some are on continents that still exist in your own time, though they are called by different names and their coastlines have changed. Others are on lands that have been swallowed by the sea or broken apart by geological forces. The civilization is held together not by political authority, but by shared culture, by the common language and knowledge system taught in temples like this one, by the trade routes and communication networks that link distant communities. Your guide shows you a map carved into a large slab of stone. It depicts the known world as understood by this civilization, showing coastlines and islands, major cities and trade routes. You recognize some features, the outline of continents that correspond roughly to those in your own time, though the details are different. Other features are entirely unfamiliar, landmasses that do not exist in your world, or exist in such changed form that you cannot identify them. The map shows Lemuria at its greatest extent, stretching from what might be southern India or Sri Lanka across the Indian Ocean to islands that might be Madagascar or the Maldives, with outposts reaching as far as the western coast of Australia and the eastern coast of Africa. Trade routes connect these scattered settlements, bringing goods and ideas from one end of the network to the other, creating a cultural sphere that influences hundreds of millions of people. As the afternoon wears on toward evening, you begin to understand the magnitude of what you are witnessing. If this civilization truly existed, if these temples and cities and trade networks were real, then the story of human history as taught in your own time is incomplete at best, fundamentally mistaken at worst. The achievements you are seeing, the knowledge systems and technologies, the social organization and cultural sophistication, all predate the earliest civilizations recognized by conventional archaeology by thousands of years. Yet there is no physical evidence for Lemuria in your own time. No ruins have been found, no artifacts recovered, no indisputable proof that such a place ever existed. The land where Amara stands might be beneath the ocean now, or it might have been crushed in a continental collision, its remains buried so deep that they will never be found. Or perhaps this place exists only in the collective imagination of humanity, a dream of a golden age when knowledge was widespread and life was harmonious, a dream that different cultures remember in different ways, creating the similar stories and myths that have led some to believe in Lemuria's historical reality. For now, you are here, standing in the temple of knowledge, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of this vanished or imaginary civilization. The light is beginning to fade as the sun drops toward the western horizon. The golden tiles of the dome glow with warm color, and the crystal at the apex sparkles with the last direct rays of the setting sun. It is time to leave the temple, to return to the streets of Amara, to witness the transition from day to night, to see how these people mark the passage of time and honor the eternal cycle of light and darkness. As you step out of the temple of knowledge, the quality of the light has changed completely. The sun sits low on the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep rose. The ocean reflects these colors, creating the illusion that the water itself is on fire. The white buildings of Amara glow warmly in the evening light, their walls taking on hints of peach and gold. The gardens along the streets are filled with the scent of flowers that bloom only at this hour, releasing their fragrances to attract the night-flying insects that pollinate them. The rhythm of the city is shifting. People are leaving their workplaces, returning to their homes, preparing for the evening meal and the activities that follow. But this is not simply a time for rest and recreation. In Lemuria, the transition from day to night is a sacred moment, a threshold between states of being that must be marked with appropriate ceremony. Your guide leads you toward the western quarter of the city, where the land slopes down toward the sea. Here, the buildings are residential, organized in clusters around shared courtyards and gardens. Families live together in extended groups, with multiple generations sharing the same complex of rooms and spaces. The architecture is designed to facilitate both privacy and community, with individual chambers opening onto common areas where meals are taken and children play and adults gather to discuss the events of the day. You enter one of these residential complexes through an arched gateway. The courtyard beyond is paved with smooth stones and planted with trees that provide shade during the heat of the day. A fountain bubbles in the center, its water flowing into a basin where children splash and laugh. Around the edges of the courtyard, doorways open into individual family quarters, each one marked with symbols or objects that identify the occupants. A woman emerges from one of the doorways, carrying a clay lamp filled with oil. She touches a flame to the wick, and the lamp begins to burn with a steady golden light. She places it in a niche beside her door, then returns inside for another lamp. Soon, other women and men emerge from their quarters, each one lighting lamps and placing them in niches or on windowsills or hanging them from hooks in the courtyard. As the natural light fades, these lamps take over, creating a warm glow that pushes back the darkness. The lighting of the lamps is more than a practical necessity. It is a ritual, a daily practice that acknowledges the cycle of light and dark, a reminder that the human task is to keep the light alive, to maintain consciousness and awareness even when the outer sun has set. Some of the lamps are simple clay vessels with wicks of twisted fiber. Others are more elaborate, made of metal or glass, their surfaces decorated with patterns and symbols, their flames protected by perforated covers that cast shadows in geometric designs. A bell rings somewhere in the city, its sound clear and penetrating, carrying across the rooftops and through the streets. It is answered by other bells, creating a cascade of sound that marks the official end of the working day. This is the signal for the evening meal, and throughout Amara, families gather to share food and conversation. In the courtyard where you stand, long tables are being set up. Women and men bring out dishes of food, placing them on the tables for all to share. There is bread, round loaves that have been baked in communal ovens, their crusts golden and dusted with seeds. There are vegetables, some raw and some cooked, arranged in bowls and on platters. There are fruits, fresh and dried, their colours bright against the dark wood of the tables. There is fish, caught that morning in the ocean or the rivers that feed into it, grilled over fires or prepared in stews flavoured with herbs and spices. The people gather around the tables, young and old, families mixing and mingling. Before they eat, they pause for a moment of silence, or perhaps it is prayer, though no words are spoken aloud. Each person stands with head bowed and hands joined, connecting with something beyond themselves, acknowledging the source of the food they are about to consume, giving thanks for the abundance of the earth and sea. Then the meal begins. It is not a quiet affair. There is laughter and conversation, stories being told, children running between the tables, adults engaged in animated discussion. The food is simple but flavorful, prepared with care and attention. You are offered a seat and a plate, and you eat gratefully, the flavors intense and satisfying after the long day of walking and observing. As you eat, you listen to the conversations around you. One group is discussing the events of the day, sharing news from the harbor or the fields or the workshops. Another is engaged in a debate about philosophy, arguing about the nature of the soul and whether it survives the death of the body. A third group is planning a festival that will take place in a few days, organizing the music and dancing and ceremonies that will be part of the celebration. The meal concludes as the last light fades from the sky. The stars are beginning to appear, first the brightest ones, then more and more as your eyes adjust to the darkness. The people clear the tables, carrying dishes and utensils back to their individual quarters for washing. Then they gather again in the courtyard, this time not around tables but in a loose circle. Someone brings out an instrument, a stringed device made of wood and sinew, its body curved and polished. They begin to play, their fingers moving across the strings, producing a melody that is both strange and hauntingly familiar. It is music unlike anything from your own time, built on scales and rhythms that your ears struggle to follow, yet it speaks to something deep within you, bypassing the intellect to touch the heart directly. Others join in, adding voices or percussion, creating a layered soundscape that fills the courtyard and spills out into the surrounding streets. This is not performance music, not entertainment in the sense you know it. This is communal music, created by and for the participants, a way of weaving the community together through sound and rhythm. People begin to move, not exactly dancing but swaying and stepping in patterns that complement the music. Children join in, mimicking the movements of the adults, learning through participation. The movements are not random, but follow a structure, telling stories or enacting rituals, embodying the myths and histories that are the foundation of this culture. Your guide taps you on the shoulder and gestures for you to follow. You leave the residential quarter and move back toward the center of the city. Night has fully fallen now, and the streets are lit by lamps placed at regular intervals, their flames protected from the wind, their light creating pools of illumination separated by stretches of shadow. You arrive at the central plaza with its ring of standing stones. The plaza is filling with people, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, all converging on this central point. They arrange themselves in concentric circles around the standing stones, leaving the center area clear. There is a sense of anticipation, of something important about to happen. At precisely the moment when the last trace of twilight disappears from the western sky, a figure emerges from the shadows at the base of one of the standing stones. It is a priest, or perhaps priestess, dressed in robes of deep blue embroidered with silver thread that catches the lamplight. They carry a staff topped with a crystal that glows with a faint internal light. The priest raises the staff, and silence falls over the crowd. Then they begin to speak, their voice carrying across the plaza with a clarity that seems impossible without amplification. They speak of the eternal cycle, of the sun that dies each evening and is reborn each morning, of the moon that waxes and wanes, of the stars that turn in their courses, marking the passage of time in rhythms that dwarf the span of human life. They speak of the ancestors, the ones who came before, who established this civilization and passed down the knowledge that allows it to continue. They speak of the sacred duty of each generation to preserve and transmit this knowledge, to add their own discoveries and insights, to leave the world better than they found it for those who will come after. The crowd responds with chants and songs, their voices rising together in harmonies that are both complex and perfectly unified. You find yourself joining in, though you do not know the words, humming along with the melody, allowing your voice to blend with the thousands of others. The ceremony continues for an hour or more. There are invocations and prayers, readings from sacred texts, demonstrations of what you might call magic, but which these people understand as the natural manipulation of energy and consciousness. At one point, the priest touches the crystal on their staff to the base of one of the standing stones, and the entire stone begins to glow with a soft blue light, as if lit from within. The light spreads to the other stones in the circle, creating a barrier of illumination that separates the crowd from the dark sky above. Finally, the ceremony concludes. The priest blesses the people, asking for protection and guidance through the night and into the new day. The crowd begins to disperse, breaking into smaller groups, some heading home to sleep, others moving to different parts of the city for continued celebration or study or work. Your guide leads you to a building near the plaza, a guest house where travelers and visitors stay. You are given a room, simple but comfortable, with a sleeping mat and blankets, a basin of water for washing, a lamp that burns with scented oil. The window looks out over the plaza, where the standing stones still glow with faint light, gradually fading as the night deepens. You lie down on the mat, exhausted by all you have seen and experienced. The sounds of the city continue outside your window, music and voices, the barking of dogs, the cry of night birds. You close your eyes, and in the darkness behind your lids, you see the images of the day replaying, the streets and buildings, the people and their activities, the ceremonies and rituals. You drift towards sleep, your last conscious thought a question. Is this real? Did such a place actually exist? Or are you dreaming, caught in a vision created by your own mind or implanted by some external force? You do not know. And as sleep takes you, you realize that perhaps the question itself is meaningless. Real or imagined, historical or mythical, Lemuria exists now in this moment, as you experience it, as you walk its streets and breathe its air and participate in its life. You wake to a world that has changed. The light through your window is the same golden quality you remember from yesterday, but something in the atmosphere is different. There is a tension in the air, a sense of unease that was not present before. You rise and dress, splashing water from the basin on your face, then step out into the corridor of the guest house. The other guests are already awake, gathered in the common room, speaking in low voices. Your guide is there, her face grave. She explains that news has arrived from the western settlements, brought by a ship that docked at dawn. There has been an earthquake, a massive one, far out in the ocean where the deepest trenches lie. The waves generated by this earthquake reached some of the western islands, causing flooding and damage. Lives were lost, buildings were destroyed. This is not the first such event. Over the past generation, these earthquakes have become more frequent, more severe. The scholars who study the earth have theories. They speak of the movements of vast plates of rock that make up the surface of the planet, how these plates grind against each other, building pressure that is occasionally released in violent shaking. They speak of the cycles of the earth, how continents rise and fall over immense spans of time, how what is land today might be ocean tomorrow, and vice versa. The people of Lemuria have lived with this knowledge for generations. They have adapted to the reality of living on a geologically active planet, building their structures to withstand shaking, creating evacuation plans, maintaining reserves of food and water for emergencies. But the recent events have been beyond the scale of anything in living memory, and there is growing concern that something fundamental is changing. You join the woman in blue robes as she walks through the city. The streets are quieter than they were yesterday. People move with a purposefulness that suggests they are attending to important tasks rather than simply going about their daily business. You pass work crews inspecting buildings, checking the foundations and walls for any signs of weakness or damage. You see people gathering supplies, filling storage rooms with preserved foods and clean water. At the Temple of Knowledge, a meeting is underway. The scholars and teachers have gathered to discuss the situation, to share what they know, to make plans for how to respond. You stand at the back of the main hall, listening as they speak. One scholar presents data on the frequency and intensity of earthquakes over the past 50 years. She has created a chart marking each event, and the pattern is clear. The events are becoming more common and more powerful. If the trend continues, they can expect earthquakes of unprecedented magnitude in the near future. Another scholar speaks about observations of the ocean. He reports that in some areas, the sea level appears to be rising, while in others it is falling. There are reports of new islands appearing where previously there was only open water, and of familiar islands disappearing beneath the waves. The coastline is changing, reshaping itself in response to forces that operate on timescales both geological and immediate. A third scholar presents a more radical theory. She argues that the continent on which they live is not stable but is slowly sinking, subsiding into the ocean as the weight of the rock overwhelms the capacity of the underlying mantle to support it. She predicts that over the course of centuries, possibly millennia, the land will continue to sink until it is entirely submerged. The civilization of Lemuria, she says, is living on borrowed time. The assembly responds to this theory with a mixture of skepticism and alarm. Some scholars dispute her calculations, arguing that the rate of subsidence is much slower than she suggests, that there is time to adapt and adjust. Others take her warning seriously, advocating for the preparation of evacuation plans, for the establishment of colonies on more stable lands, for the preservation of knowledge in forms that might survive the destruction of the temples and libraries. The debate continues for hours, with no clear consensus emerging. Finally, the eldest scholar, a man who has spent his entire long life studying the earth and its processes, stands to speak. His voice is quiet but carries authority earned through decades of patient observation and thought. He says that whether the catastrophe comes in their lifetimes or in some distant future, the duty of the present generation remains the same. They must preserve knowledge. They must pass it on to their children and their children's children. They must record what they know in durable forms, carving it into stone, embedding it in the landscape itself, creating monuments and markers that might survive when the cities are gone. He says that if Lemuria is destined to sink beneath the waves, then its people must become seeds, scattered across the world, carrying their knowledge and culture to new lands where it can take root and grow. The civilization might change, might adapt and evolve, might even fragment and forget its origins. But the essential truths, the fundamental insights into the nature of reality and consciousness, these can survive if they are transmitted with care and intention. The assembly concludes with a resolution to begin a great project of preservation and dispersal. Teams will be formed to document the accumulated knowledge of the civilization, to create copies of important texts, to train missionaries who will travel to distant lands and establish new schools and temples. At the same time, they will continue their daily work, maintaining the cities and farms and workshops, living as fully as possible in the time that remains. As you leave the temple, you feel the weight of what you have witnessed. This is a civilization facing its own mortality, aware that the world it knows might end, yet choosing to respond not with despair but with determined effort to ensure that something of value survives. You walk through the streets of Amara, seeing it now with different eyes. Every building, every street, every garden represents countless hours of labor and thought. The people who built this place poured their lives into it, believing they were creating something that would last. And perhaps it will last, in some form, even if the physical structures are destroyed. Your guide takes you to the harbor, where ships are being prepared for long voyages. These are not the trading vessels that make regular trips to nearby ports. These are exploration ships, built for extended journeys, equipped with supplies for months at sea. They are setting out to find new lands, to chart the unknown reaches of the ocean, to identify places where colonies might be established. You watch as one ship casts off from the dock, its sails unfurling to catch the morning breeze. The crew waves to the people gathered on shore, their faces showing a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They are leaving behind everything they know, venturing into uncertainty, carrying with them the hope that what they find will ensure the survival of their culture and their people. The afternoon is spent in one of the workshops where artisans are creating what they call memory vessels. These are containers, some made of ceramic, others of metal or stone, designed to hold written records in forms that can withstand water and fire and time. The records are inscribed on tablets of gold or clay or carved into crystals, then sealed inside the vessels with wax or resin. The vessels will be buried in different locations, some in the mountains, others on high ground away from the coast, creating a distributed archive that might survive whatever catastrophe is coming. You watch as a scribe carefully inscribes a text onto a thin sheet of gold. The writing is microscopic, dense with information, requiring magnification to read. The scribe works with absolute concentration, aware that this might be the only copy of this particular text that survives. When the inscription is complete, the gold sheet is rolled carefully and placed inside a ceramic tube, which is then sealed with wax and marked with symbols indicating its contents. As evening approaches, you return to the central plaza. The standing stones are there as always, but now you understand them differently. They are not just monuments or calendars. They are markers intended to endure, placed according to precise astronomical alignments, so that future generations, even if they have lost all other knowledge, might rediscover the principles of the civilization that created them. The sun sets in a display of colors even more dramatic than the previous evening. The entire western sky is ablaze with reds and golds and purples, as if the sun itself is protesting its daily death. The people of Amara gather in the plaza as they did before, but tonight the ceremony has a different quality. There is a solemnity, a recognition that each day might be the last normal day, that change is coming whether they are ready for it or not. The priest who led the ceremony the previous night speaks again, but the words are different. Tonight, there is talk of courage and resilience, of the strength of the human spirit, of the ability to adapt and survive in the face of overwhelming challenges. There is talk of hope, not the naive hope that everything will be fine, but the deeper hope that is not dependent on outcomes, the hope that finds meaning in effort itself, in the act of striving, even when success is uncertain. As you stand among the crowd, participating in the chants and prayers, you feel a profound connection to these people. Whether they are historical figures from a vanished civilization or characters in a shared dream, their struggle is universal. Every human society faces uncertainty. Every generation must deal with challenges that threaten its survival. What matters is not whether they succeed in preserving their civilization in its current form, but whether they face their fate with dignity and wisdom. Night falls, and the ceremony concludes. The crowd disperses more quietly than the night before, people returning to their homes with much to think about. You return to the guest house, to your simple room, and lie down on your sleeping mat. Tomorrow, you will see what the future holds for Lemuria, how the story continues, whether the dire predictions come true, or whether this is simply another crisis that will be navigated and overcome. For tonight, you rest, allowing sleep to take you, your dreams filled with images of sinking cities and rising seas, of ships sailing toward unknown horizons, of seeds planted in fertile soil, waiting for the right conditions to germinate and grow. Time passes differently now. You are no longer experiencing single days, but moving through weeks and months and years in compressed moments. The mechanism that brought you to this place, this time, is changing the speed of your perception, allowing you to witness the unfolding of events that would normally take lifetimes. The first major earthquake comes on a morning like any other. You are walking through the streets of Amara when the ground begins to shake. It starts as a tremor, a vibration you can feel through the soles of your feet, then builds rapidly into violent motion that throws people to the ground and causes buildings to sway and crack. The noise is overwhelming, a deep rumbling from the earth itself, punctuated by the crash of falling masonry and the screams of people caught by surprise. The shaking lasts for what feels like an eternity, but is probably less than a minute. When it stops, the silence that follows is almost as shocking as the noise that preceded it. Then, gradually, the sounds of the aftermath begin, voices calling out, searching for loved ones, checking on neighbors, assessing damage. You stand in the street, surrounded by dust and rubble. Some buildings have collapsed completely, reduced to piles of broken stone. Others are standing but heavily damaged, their walls cracked, their roofs sagging. The standing stones in the central plaza have survived, but several have shifted position, no longer aligned as precisely as they were. The people of Amara respond with the efficiency born of preparation. Work crews emerge with tools and equipment, beginning the process of clearing rubble, rescuing anyone trapped, making buildings safe. Medical teams set up stations to treat injuries. Food and water are distributed from emergency stores. Children are gathered into safe areas and watched over by adults while their parents deal with the crisis. You help where you can, joining a crew that is digging through the remains of a collapsed building, searching for survivors. The work is hard and hot, the sun beating down on your back as you lift and move stones, listening for any sound that might indicate someone is alive beneath the debris. Hours pass, and you find several people, some alive, some not. Each discovery is met with either relief or grief, and you learn that there is little time for either emotion before you must move on to the next site, the next potential rescue. In the days that follow, the city slowly recovers. Buildings are repaired or rebuilt. The dead are mourned and buried according to custom. Life continues, but with a new awareness of vulnerability, a knowledge that the ground beneath your feet is not as solid as it seems. More earthquakes come, some smaller, some as large as the first. After each one, there is the same cycle of damage and repair, loss and recovery. The people adapt, learning to live with the constant threat, building more carefully, storing more supplies, maintaining readiness for the next event. But then come the signs that something more fundamental is changing. The sea level begins to rise, slowly at first, then more rapidly. The docks that were built on the shore now sit partly underwater at high tide. Low-lying areas of the city flood regularly, forcing people to abandon their homes and move to higher ground. The harbour must be rebuilt, extended further out into deeper water. The scholars who predicted this development are proven correct, but there is no satisfaction in being right. They work tirelessly to understand what is happening, to measure the rate of change, to predict how far and how fast the water will rise. Their calculations are grim. If the current rate continues, much of Amara will be underwater within a generation. Other coastal cities face the same fate. The great project of dispersal accelerates. Ships leave the harbour weekly, carrying refugees to other lands, to colonies on continents that are more stable, to islands that sit on rising rather than sinking plates of rock. Each ship carries not just people but knowledge, books and tools and seeds, everything necessary to establish a new settlement and maintain the cultural practices of Lemuria. You watch one of these departures from the shore. The ship is crowded with families, their belongings packed into bundles and baskets, children clutching toys, adults standing at the rail, looking back at the city they are leaving, perhaps forever. There is crying and waving, final goodbyes shouted across the widening gap of water as the ship moves away from the dock. Those who remain in Amara face a difficult choice. They can stay and continue their lives in a city that is slowly being reclaimed by the ocean, or they can leave, abandoning everything they have built, everything familiar, to start over in a strange land. Many choose to stay, at least for now, unable or unwilling to leave their homes. You remain as well, your role as observer keeping you anchored to this place, even as it becomes increasingly clear that its days are numbered. You watch as the population of Amara declines, as whole neighborhoods are abandoned to the rising water, as the focus of the city shifts to the higher ground in the eastern quarters. The Temple of Knowledge is evacuated. The scrolls and codices are packed carefully into containers and loaded onto ships. The memory vessels are buried in the mountains, in caves and crypts, marked with signs that might be recognized by future generations. The great bronze model of the heavens is disassembled and carried away piece by piece. The halls that once echoed with the voices of teachers and students now stand empty, their silence broken only by the drip of water seeping in from the rising sea. Years pass, and the city becomes unrecognizable. Streets that were once dry are now canals, navigable only by boat. Buildings stand half submerged, their lower floors flooded, their upper floors still occupied by the stubborn or the desperate. The central plaza, with its standing stones, remains above water, but now it is an island, surrounded by shallow sea. The population that remains adapts to this new reality. They become boat people, traveling through the flooded streets in small craft, maintaining a network of platforms and floating gardens, fishing in the waters that now cover what were once marketplaces and residential areas. It is a strange, liminal existence, neither fully land-based nor fully aquatic, a transitional state as the city transforms from one thing into another. You stand on one of the remaining dry areas, a hilltop in the eastern quarter, and look out over the drowned city. The standing stones are still visible, rising from the water like the bones of some ancient giant. The buildings that remain above the surface are weathered and worn, their surfaces stained by salt and algae, their decorations faded, their structural integrity compromised. The sun is setting, painting the flooded city in shades of gold and crimson. The water reflects the sky, creating an effect of infinite space, as if the city is floating in the heavens rather than sinking into the sea. It is beautiful in a melancholic way, a beauty tinged with loss and endings. Your guide stands beside you, her face aged now, weathered by years and sorrow. She speaks about the nature of impermanence, how everything that has a beginning must have an end, how cities and civilizations are like individuals, born and dying, their lives meaningful, despite their ultimate dissolution. She tells you that Lemuria as a unified civilization is ending. The network of cities and colonies that once spanned the ocean is fragmenting. Each settlement is developing its own character, adapting to its local environment, evolving in directions that will eventually create distinct cultures. The common language is already beginning to diverge into dialects. The shared knowledge system is being modified and supplemented with local discoveries and insights. But this is not pure loss, she says. It is transformation. The seed of Lemuria is being planted in many soils, and what grows from those seeds will be new and different, perhaps even more diverse and resilient than the parent civilization. The knowledge will survive, encoded in different forms, passed down through different traditions, some of it lost, some of it preserved, some of it rediscovered in future ages. As full darkness falls, the few remaining inhabitants of Amara gather on the hilltop for one last ceremony. They light lamps and place them on the water, creating a floating constellation of lights that drifts with the current. They sing the old songs, speak the old prayers, honor the ancestors and the city that is passing away. You participate in this final ceremony, your voice joining with theirs, your lamp floating away with the others, a point of light among hundreds, each one representing a memory, a moment, a life lived in the city that once was. The lights drift and scatter, some going out, others persisting, spreading across the flooded plaza, transforming it one last time into something beautiful and terrible. When the ceremony ends, people begin to leave the hilltop, returning to their boats or their temporary shelters. Tomorrow, many of them will depart on the ships that have been waiting in the deep water harbour. They will join the diaspora, carrying with them what they can salvage of their heritage, starting new chapters in new lands. You remain on the hilltop as the last people leave. Your guide has disappeared, her task complete, leaving you alone to witness the final moments of Amara. You stand in the darkness, listening to the lap of water against stone, the cry of seabirds, the whisper of wind through the ruins. You understand now that what you are experiencing might not be historical memory, but something else, a collective dream or vision, a story that humanity tells itself about loss and survival, about the impermanence of all things, and the endurance of consciousness, even when its material forms dissolve. Whether Lemuria was real or imagined, whether Amara truly existed or is a symbol of something deeper, the experience has been real for you. You have walked these streets, met these people, participated in their joys and sorrows. You have learned from them, absorbed something of their wisdom and their way of seeing the world. As the night deepens, you feel yourself beginning to shift, to change, to move away from this time and place. The mechanism that brought you here is reversing, pulling you back toward your own time, your own reality. You resist for a moment, wanting to stay, to see what happens next, but the pull is irresistible. The drowned city begins to fade, becoming translucent, then transparent, then gone completely. You are left floating in a void, neither here nor there, suspended between times, carrying with you the memories of a world that exists now only in the spaces between sleep and waking, in the borderlands, where history and myth merge into something that is truer than either alone. You wake in your own time, in your own bed, in a world where Lemuria is a legend rather than a memory. The morning light through your window is familiar, ordinary, lacking the strange golden quality of the light in Amara. The sounds are different too, mechanical and harsh, the noise of traffic and machinery rather than voices and bells and the natural music of wind and water. You lie still for a moment, trying to hold on to the fading images, the dissolving impressions of the place you have been. Was it real? Did you truly travel to an ancient civilization? Or was it a dream, a fantasy constructed by your sleeping mind? The memories are vivid, detailed, possessed of a coherence and consistency that seems beyond the capacity of dreams. Yet you know that the mind is capable of creating entire worlds in sleep, complete with histories and geographies and populations, worlds that seem absolutely real while you are experiencing them but dissolve upon waking. You rise and go about your day, but the experience stays with you. You find yourself thinking about Amara, about the people you met, about the woman in blue robes who guided you through the city. You wonder about the ships that sailed away carrying refugees, where they went, what happened to them, whether any trace of their journeys remains. You begin to research, searching for information about Lemuria, about the theories and legends and speculations. You discover that the idea of a lost continent in the Indian or Pacific Ocean has a long history. Ancient Tamil texts speak of a land called Kumari Kandam that was swallowed by the sea. Greek philosophers, including Plato, wrote about Atlantis, a powerful civilization that sank beneath the waves. In the 19th century, Zoologists noting similarities between the fauna of Madagascar and India proposed a land bridge they named Lemuria that had since disappeared. The geological evidence, you learn, does not support the existence of a continent in these locations, at least not in the time frame of human civilization. The ocean floor in the Indian Ocean is ancient, formed by the separation of continental plates millions of years before humans evolved. There is no mechanism by which a large landmass could have existed there and then vanished within the last 100,000 years. Yet the legends persist, found in cultures around the world that had no contact with each other until recent times. The Hopi people of North America speak of a previous world that was destroyed. Hindu texts describe multiple cycles of creation and destruction. Aboriginal Australian traditions tell of a time when the seas were lower and lands now submerged were above water. Are these memories of real events, distorted and mythologized over millennia of oral transmission? Or are they expressions of universal human concerns about impermanence and catastrophe? You visit museums, looking at artifacts from ancient cultures, seeking anything that might connect to what you experienced. You find megaliths that remind you of the standing stones in Amara's central plaza, though they are in places far from the Indian Ocean. You find sculptures and carvings that seem to embody principles of sacred geometry similar to those you saw in the architecture of Lemuria. You find astronomical alignments in ruins scattered across the globe, suggesting that ancient peoples possessed sophisticated understanding of the movements of celestial bodies. None of this proves the existence of Lemuria, but it suggests that human civilizations have been more advanced and widespread than conventional history acknowledges. There may not have been a single unified civilization spanning the Indian Ocean, but there may have been multiple sophisticated cultures that developed independently or in contact with each other, whose achievements have been forgotten or misattributed, or buried beneath rising seas. You think about the message of preservation that was so important to the people of Amara in their final days. They knew their civilization was ending, so they worked to ensure that something of value would survive. They encoded their knowledge in multiple forms, creating redundancy, distributing copies across a wide geographical area, using durable materials and symbolic languages that might be deciphered by future generations. Perhaps this is what we are finding now, you think. Perhaps the megalithic structures, the astronomical alignments, the myths and legends, perhaps these are the memory vessels, the markers left by people who knew their world was ending and wanted to leave some trace for those who would come after. Perhaps we have been walking past these messages all along, seeing them but not understanding them, treating them as curiosities or tourist attractions, rather than serious attempts at communication across time. You wonder what messages we should be leaving for future generations. What knowledge would we want to preserve if we knew our civilization was ending? How would we encode it so that it could be understood by people who might not share our language or our cultural assumptions? What would we choose to say to those who will come after us? The experience in Lemuria, whether real or imagined, has given you a perspective on your own time and place. You see your civilization differently now, aware of its impermanence, conscious that everything you take for granted could vanish, that the cities and technologies and institutions that seem so solid and eternal are actually fragile constructs balanced on a foundation of assumptions that might not hold. Yet, this awareness does not lead to despair. Instead, it creates a sense of urgency and purpose. If time is limited, then it must be used well. If knowledge can be lost, then it must be preserved and transmitted. If civilizations can fall, then we must work to make ours worthy of being remembered, not for its monuments and technologies, but for its wisdom and compassion, for the values it embodied and the legacy it left. You think about the people you met in Amara, their dedication to learning and teaching, their commitment to community and cooperation, their respect for the earth and the rhythms of nature, their understanding that material prosperity means nothing without spiritual development. These are not unique to Lemuria, real or imagined. These are universal human aspirations, values that appear in cultures across time and space, ideals that we strive for even when we fall short. Perhaps this is the real message of Lemuria, not that such a place actually existed in history, but that it exists in potential, in the human capacity to create societies based on wisdom rather than force, on cooperation rather than competition, on harmony with nature rather than domination over it. Lemuria is not a lost past, but a possible future, a vision of what we could become if we chose to develop in that direction. As the day draws to a close, you find yourself back at your window, watching the sun set over your familiar landscape. The colors are beautiful in their own way, different from, but no less worthy than the sunsets of Amara. The world you inhabit is real and precious, filled with wonders both natural and human-made, deserving of your attention and care. You think of the lamps floating on the water in the final ceremony, each one a point of light, a memory, a moment of consciousness shining against the darkness. You understand now that this is what we all are, individual points of light, burning brightly for our brief time, then passing away, leaving behind whatever warmth and illumination we managed to create. The important thing is not whether we are remembered, but whether we lived well, whether we contributed something of value, whether we left the world a little better than we found it. The people of Lemuria understood this. They faced the end of their civilization not with despair but with determination, working until the very end to preserve what was valuable, to plant seeds that might grow in distant places and future times. You can do the same. You can live with awareness and purpose. You can work to preserve and transmit what you value. You can treat each day as precious, each interaction as meaningful, each moment as an opportunity to create something beautiful that will ripple forward into the future in ways you cannot predict or control. As night falls, you feel gratitude for the experience you had, real or imagined. You feel grateful for the lessons learned, for the perspective gained, for the reminder that our time here is limited and therefore infinitely valuable. You feel grateful for the ancient dream of Lemuria, whether it represents historical memory or eternal aspiration, whether it describes what was or what could be. You close your eyes and allow yourself to drift towards sleep, carrying with you the images of the drowned city, the standing stones, the people who lived and worked and loved in a place that may never have existed except in the collective imagination of humanity. And as sleep takes you, you whisper a final thank you to the woman in blue robes who guided you, to the civilization that may or may not have been, to the eternal human hope for a world of wisdom and peace and harmony. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the mists of time, through the borderlands between history and legend, through the streets of a city that lives now only in our shared dreaming. May you carry forward whatever wisdom speaks to you from this ancient vision. May your own light shine brightly in the darkness. And may we all work together to create a future worthy of being remembered, a legacy that honors both what we have been and what we aspire to become. Sleep well and dream of wonders.